My name is Emma Martinez Thompson, and if I've learned anything in the past year, it's that true value isn't always visible at first glance. Sometimes it's buried deep beneath the surface, protected by generations of silence. The story began at Henderson and Associates Law Office in Phoenix, Arizona, where my husband Michael and I sat with his family for the reading of his father's will. Robert Thompson Sr. had been a tough man to please in life, and it seemed he'd designed his will to continue that tradition after death. To my eldest son, Robert Jr., I leave the Thompson Energy corporate holdings and my position as CEO, the lawyer Reed. No surprise there. Robert Jr. had been groomed for that role since birth. To my daughter, Catherine, I leave the family estate in Paradise Valley and my art collection. Catherine smirked, already mentally redecorating. And to my youngest son, Michael, the lawyer paused, adjusting his glasses. I leave the old Thompson Ranch property in Serpent Valley, all 300 acres. The room erupted in poorly concealed laughter. Robert Jr. didn't even try to hide his amusement. Perfect, the family failure gets the worthless desert. Dad's sense of humor lasted right to the end. I squeezed Michael's hand as he stared at the floor. He'd spent years trying to earn his father's approval, turning down a promising career in environmental science to work at Thompson Energy. Nothing had ever been good enough. There was one condition, the lawyer continued, silencing the room. The Serpent Valley property cannot be sold for at least 1 year after my death. It must be maintained in its current condition. If these conditions are not met, the property reverts to Thompson Energy. What's to maintain? Catherine snorted. Rattlesnakes and cacti. But I noticed something odd. A slight tremor in the lawyer's hand as he read that part, a flicker of something in his eyes. And I remembered the last time we'd visited Robert Sr. in the hospital. How he gripped Michael's hand and whispered, "Protect the valley." We thought it was just delirium. The next day, Michael and I drove out to see our inheritance. The property lay 2 hours north of Phoenix, in a valley that lived up to its name. The winding road was marked by a weathered sign, Thompson Ranch, no trespassing. Dad used to talk about this place, Michael said as we bumped along the dirt road. Said his grandfather won it in a poker game back in the 1920s. Never did anything with it except pay the property taxes. The valley opened up before us, a stunning expanse of red rock and desert sage. In the distance, ancient cliffs rose like guardians, their faces etched by centuries of wind and rain. It was beautiful in a harsh, untamed way. Look, I pointed to a cluster of old buildings, a small ranch house, a barn, and what looked like a storage shed, all weathered by decades of desert sun. As we explored the ranch house, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something. The buildings were old but solidly built. The location, while remote, had a strange beauty. Why had the Thompson family held onto this property for 3 generations without developing it? "Hey, come look at this," Michael called from what must have been his grandfather's office. He was holding a dusty ledger, its pages yellow with age. The ledger contained meticulous notes about the property, but they were odd. Instead of the expected ranch records, there were entries about geological surveys never filed, visitors turned away, and repeated mentions of something called the Guardian's Trust. "Your father kept this place exactly as his father left it," I mused, flipping through the pages. "And his father before him." "Why?" Before Michael could answer, a truck appeared in the driveway. Not the shiny SUVs his siblings drove, but an old pickup with tribal plates. A man stepped out, tall, weathered, probably in his 60s, wearing a turquoise belt buckle that caught the sunlight. "I am John Red Cloud," he said as we walked out to meet him, chief of the Navajo Nation's Council of Elders. "I've been waiting for you." Michael and I exchanged glances. "Waiting for us?" Chief Red Cloud nodded solemnly. "Your grandfather, your father's father, he was a friend to our people. He understood what this valley truly is, what it protects." "Protects?" Michael asked. The chief's eyes swept the valley, settling on a particular formation in the cliffs. "There are things in this world that should remain undisturbed. Your great-grandfather learned this. Your grandfather honored it. Your father," he paused, "your father struggled with the knowledge, but in the end he chose wisely." He reached into his truck and pulled out a worn leather map case. "Before your father died, he asked me to give you this when you were ready. I think that time is now." Inside the case was an old map of the valley, but unlike any map I'd seen before. It showed strange markings, ancient paths, and symbols I didn't recognize. And there in the center was something that made my breath catch, a detailed drawing of what lay beneath the valley floor. "This isn't just land," Chief Red Cloud said quietly. "This is sacred ground. And now you are its guardians." As the sun set behind the cliffs, casting long shadows across the valley, I realized why Robert Sr. had given Michael this inheritance. Not as a punishment, but as a test, and maybe, just maybe, as a chance for redemption. What we didn't know then was that others had already learned about the valley's secret, and they would stop at nothing to take it from us. The map Chief Red Cloud gave us changed everything. Beneath the valley's surface lay a vast network of underground springs and caves. But that wasn't what made the land sacred. The caves contained something far more precious, ancient petroglyphs and artifacts that told the story of the land's first peoples, preserved perfectly for thousands of years. The springs create a natural climate control system, Chief Red Cloud explained as we examined the map in the ranch house. That's why the artifacts have survived so long. Your great-grandfather discovered the caves by accident while digging a well. When he realized what he'd found, he protected it, Michael finished, understanding dawning in his eyes. That's why the family kept the land. Yes, he made a pact with my grandfather, then chief of the council. The Thompson family would be the guardians, keeping the world away until the right time came. Before we could ask what the right time meant, the sound of approaching vehicles cut through the desert silence. Through the window, I saw 3 black SUVs racing up the dirt road, kicking up clouds of dust. "Right on schedule," Chief Red Cloud muttered, quickly rolling up the map. "Your brother works fast." Robert Jr. burst through the door without knocking, followed by 2 men in expensive suits. His face was flushed with excitement barely masked as concern. "Michael, thank God you're here. Listen, there's something you need to know about this property. Our geological survey team found some interesting readings. Thompson Energy is prepared to make you a very generous offer." "The land isn't for sale, Robert," Michael interrupted quietly. "You know the conditions of the will." Robert's fake smile faltered. "Don't be stupid, little brother. This is business. The survey shows potential for massive helium deposits. Do you have any idea how valuable those are? We're talking billions." "Helium deposits?" Chief Red Cloud's voice carried a hint of amusement. "Is that what your instruments detected?" Robert finally noticed the chief's presence, his expression turning cold. "This is a private family matter. I'll have to ask you to leave." "Actually," I stepped forward, "Chief Red Cloud is here at our invitation. And he's right, your instruments aren't detecting helium deposits." The next hour was a crash course in the valley's true significance. Chief Red Cloud explained how the cave system's unique properties had preserved not just artifacts, but an entire lost history of the American Southwest. The readings Robert's team had detected were actually the vast underground springs that had protected these treasures for millennia. This site could rewrite everything we know about ancient Native American civilizations, I explained, my archaeological background finally proving useful. "It's priceless, but not in the way you think." Robert's face grew darker with each word. "You can't be serious. You'd throw away billions for some old cave paintings? This is exactly why Dad never trusted you with anything important." Actually, Michael's voice was stronger now. "I think this is exactly why he did trust me with this. Because he knew I understand its real value." "We'll see about that," Robert snarled, storming out. His parting shot carried clearly. "The will says you have to maintain the property. Let's see how long you can do that without money." He was right about one thing: maintaining 300 acres of desert property wasn't cheap. Over the next months, Robert threw every obstacle he could at us. Our water rights were mysteriously challenged, road access was disputed. Anonymous complaints about property violations flooded the county office. But Robert had underestimated us, and the power of the valley's secret. Chief Red Cloud introduced us to Dr. Sarah Blackwood, a leading archaeologist specializing in Southwest Native American cultures. When she saw the cave system, she actually cried. "This is unprecedented," she breathed, examining a perfectly preserved ceremonial chamber. "The historical and cultural significance. This needs to be protected at all costs." Within weeks, Dr. Blackwood had helped us file for protected status with both state and federal authorities. The valley was declared a site of exceptional historical importance, making any industrial development impossible. regardless of who owned it. Robert was furious. His dreams of helium billions evaporated as news of the archaeological discovery spread through academic circles. But his final play was still to come. 6 months after the will reading, Catherine showed up at the ranch house. Unlike Robert's bullying, she tried honey. "Mikey," she wheedled, using his childhood name, "you're not thinking this through. Yes, the caves are historically important, but think bigger. We could build a cultural center, a museum, a resort celebrating Native American heritage. Thompson Energy would handle everything. You wouldn't have to worry about maintenance costs." I watched my husband's face, seeing the old pull of family approval warring with his newfound sense of purpose. But when he spoke, his voice was firm. "The valley isn't a tourist attraction, Kath. It's a sacred trust." The answer is no. The honey vanished. "You always were Dad's biggest disappointment," she snapped. "Now I see why he gave you this worthless dirt. You deserve each other." But her words had no power anymore. Michael had found something stronger than his family's approval. He found his purpose. Working with Chief Red Cloud and Dr. Blackwood, we established the Serpent Valley Heritage Trust. The cave system was carefully documented while respecting its sacred nature. Select artifacts, chosen by the tribal council, were displayed in a small museum on the property, with proceeds supporting both site preservation and Native American education programs. 1 year after the will reading, Robert and Catherine returned, this time with lawyers. They claimed we had failed to maintain the property by allowing archaeological teams access. The hearing was held in the county courthouse. Robert's lawyers presented photos of research equipment, arguing this violated the will's requirement to keep the property in its current condition. Then our lawyer, the same one who had read the will, stood up. "I have here," he said, pulling out a sealed envelope, "Robert Thompson Sr.'s explicit instructions regarding the maintenance clause." He read, "The property must be maintained in its role as guardian of the valley's secrets, in partnership with the original guardians who showed my grandfather the truth." Robert Jr.'s face went white. The old lawyer continued, "Mr. Thompson approached me 10 years ago about this addendum. He knew exactly what would happen when his children learned about the valley." The case was dismissed. As we left the courthouse, I asked the lawyer why he hadn't revealed this earlier. Mr. Thompson was very clear, he smiled. Michael had to choose to protect the valley on his own, not because of his father's instructions. He had to prove he understood its true value. Today the valley remains a peaceful place, its secrets carefully protected. The old ranch house has become a research center, where archaeologists and tribal historians work together to unlock the mysteries of the caves while respecting their sacred nature. Michael has found his calling, combining his environmental science background with the valley's preservation. He's never been happier or more fulfilled. Robert and Catherine don't visit anymore, but sometimes I catch them looking at news articles about the unprecedented archaeological discoveries at Serpent Valley. Last week, we found something interesting in the old ranch house. A letter from Michael's great-grandfather to his son, written in 1943. "This land's true worth isn't in what you can take from it, but in what you protect for the future. Some will call you a fool for guarding dust and rocks. Let them. The greatest treasures are often the ones that can't be sold." As I watched the sun set behind the ancient cliffs, painting the sky in colors no artist could capture, I think about value. How it's measured not in dollars, but in preservation, in respect, in understanding what truly matters. Robert Sr. knew exactly what he was doing when he gave Michael this worthless inheritance. He wasn't punishing his youngest son. He was entrusting him with something priceless. And sometimes that's the greatest gift of all. They say you never really know someone until money's involved. In my case, it took losing my husband Michael and inheriting his classic car collection to see my in-laws' true colors. I'm Emily, and at 35, I found myself juggling life as a widow, a mother to a chronically ill child, and the unexpected owner of 12 meticulously restored classic cars that my husband had lovingly collected over the years. Michael's passion for automobiles was legendary in our small town of Cedar Grove. Each car in his collection had a story, from the 1965 Mustang he restored with his father as a teenager to the rare 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air he bought the day our son Nathan was born. "This is Nathan's college fund," he joked, polishing the Bel Air's chrome trim until it gleamed. Or his first house, depending on how the market goes. We'd laugh, but Michael was always thinking ahead, planning for our future, for Nathan's future. Nathan was born with cystic fibrosis. The diagnosis came when he was 6 months old, turning our world upside down. Michael's parents, Robert and Diana, ran a successful construction company in town, and they helped us initially with the mounting medical bills. But Michael was proud and determined to handle things on his own. He threw himself into his work as an investment banker, saved aggressively, and built his car collection not just as a hobby, but as a safety net for our family. Classic cars appreciate better than stock sometimes, he'd tell me, showing me the latest market valuations, and they're a lot more fun to look at. The accident happened on a rainy Tuesday evening. Michael was driving home from a late meeting when a drunk driver crossed the median. He died instantly, they told me, but that knowledge brought little comfort. One moment I was texting him about what he wanted for dinner. The next I was planning his funeral. Robert and Diana stepped in immediately, taking charge of the funeral arrangements while I sat in a daze, holding Nathan's hand as he struggled to understand why Daddy wasn't coming home. They were a constant presence in those first few weeks, bringing food, handling paperwork, watching Nathan when I needed to meet with lawyers. "We're family," Diana would say, smoothing my hair like I was a child. "We take care of our own." The reading of the will brought the first crack in their supportive facade. Michael had left everything to me, the house, his investments, and most significantly, his entire car collection. Robert's face darkened when the lawyer read that part. "Those cars were supposed to stay in the family," he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Michael and I restored that Mustang together. I ignored the comment, too grief-stricken to engage. But looking back, that was the moment everything began to change. The construction company started struggling about 3 months after Michael's death. The economy was down, contracts were drying up, and Robert and Diana's comfortable lifestyle began showing signs of strain. Their visits became more frequent, but the atmosphere had shifted. They spent more time in Michael's garage than with Nathan and me. "These cars just sitting here, it's not what Michael would have wanted," Robert would say, running his hand along the Mustang's hood. "He'd want them being driven, appreciated." "Nathan's medical bills must be overwhelming," Diana would add, her voice dripping with concern that felt increasingly artificial. "You know, we could help you sell a few of these. It would be such a weight off your shoulders." I deflect these suggestions, remembering Michael's pride in his collection, his plans for our son's future, but their hints grew more insistent, especially after Nathan's latest hospitalization required specialized treatments not fully covered by insurance. "Emily, be reasonable." Robert cornered me one evening after bringing Nathan home from a doctor's appointment. "The company's facing some temporary setbacks. We need capital to weather this storm. These cars are just gathering dust while you struggle with medical bills. It doesn't make sense." "The cars are Nathan's inheritance," I said firmly. Michael was clear about that. Diana's perfectly maintained smile cracked slightly. "Nathan's inheritance? Emily dear, be practical. With his condition, well, let's just say long-term planning might not be the best use of resources right now." The words hit me like a physical blow. Did my mother-in-law just imply what I thought she did? Before I could respond, Robert jumped in. "What Diana means is we need to think about the present. The company employs half the town. If we go under, a lot of families will suffer. Surely Michael would want to prevent that." I looked at them, these people who'd been my second family for over a decade, and suddenly saw strangers. "Get out," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Get out of my house." "Emily, don't be dramatic." Diana reached for my arm. "We're just trying to help. Nathan's medical bills are clearly a burden on you, and—" "A burden?" I cut her off, my voice rising. "My son is not a burden. He is your grandson. And you just suggested—" I couldn't even finish the sentence. They left, but not before Robert delivered a final threat. "Think carefully about this, Emily. You're not the only one who lost Michael. We have rights too. Don't make us take legal action." That night, after putting Nathan to bed, I sat in Michael's garage surrounded by his beloved cars. Each one held memories. Michael teaching me to drive stick in the Mustang, our first date in the Thunderbird, bringing Nathan home from the hospital in the Bel Air. As I ran my hand along the Mustang's smooth finish, something clicked in my memory. Michael's voice. "Always keep copies of everything, Em, especially the important stuff." He'd been obsessive about documentation, keeping detailed records of every car's restoration, every business transaction, every important paper. I spent the next 3 hours going through his home office, searching through meticulously organized files until I found what I was looking for. My hands trembled as I read the documents, pieces falling into place like a complex puzzle. The construction company wasn't just struggling, it was on the verge of collapse. But more importantly, buried in the incorporation papers was a detail that Robert and Diana had conveniently forgotten to mention. Michael owned 51% of the company, and now I did. The next morning, I called in sick to work and made 2 appointments, one with Michael's lawyer, James Patterson, and another with his old friend Tom Reynolds, who happened to be a forensic accountant. I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with before confronting Robert and Diana. "Let me get this straight," James said, adjusting his reading glasses as he reviewed the documents I found. Michael bought majority ownership in his parents' company 5 years ago when they were facing bankruptcy. I nodded, remembering how proud Michael had been to help his parents while ensuring the company's survival. He never told them about the ownership structure, said it would hurt their pride too much. They thought he just arranged a private loan through his investment contacts. James whistled low. "Well, Mrs. Bennett, as Michael's heir, you now own 51% of Bennett Construction. And these threats from Robert about legal action?" He shook his head. "They don't have a leg to stand on." Tom's findings were even more revealing. "Emily, they've been cooking the books," he said, spreading spreadsheets across his desk. "The company isn't just struggling. They've been siphoning money into personal accounts for years. If this gets reported to the IRS, I spent the next week gathering evidence, making copies, and preparing for what I knew would be an explosive confrontation. Through it all, I kept thinking about Nathan, about Michael, about the future we planned together. My in-laws weren't making things easier. They'd started spreading rumors around town about my mental state since Michael's death, suggesting I was making irrational decisions about the family business. Some old family friends stopped calling. Even at Nathan's school, I noticed other parents giving me concerned looks. "Mommy," Nathan asked one evening as I helped him with his breathing treatments, "why don't Grandma and Grandpa come visit anymore? Are they mad at us?" I held him close, breathing in the sweet scent of his hair. "No, sweetheart. They're just confused right now. But everything's going to be okay. I promise." The annual shareholders meeting of Bennett Construction was scheduled for the following Friday. Robert and Diana had been pushing me to sign over proxy rights for Michael's shares, claiming I was too emotionally fragile to participate. Instead, I spent hours preparing with James and Tom, understanding every detail of what I was about to do. The morning of the meeting, I dressed carefully in Michael's favorite blue suit of mine, the one he said made me look like a CEO. I dropped Nathan off at Sarah and Jim's house, my closest friends who'd stood by me through everything, and drove to the company headquarters. The conference room was packed with board members, senior employees, and various shareholders. Robert and Diana sat at the head of the table, looking confident and composed. They barely acknowledged my presence when I walked in with James at my side. "Before we begin," Robert announced, shuffling some papers, "I want to address the elephant in the room. Our beloved son Michael's passing has left us all grieving, but we must think of the company's future. His widow, Emily, holds some shares but has expressed uncertainty about her role. We believe it's in everyone's best interest if—" "Actually," I cut in, my voice steady despite my pounding heart, "I'd like to say something first." Diana's patronizing smile appeared. "Dear, perhaps this isn't the best time. These meetings can be quite complex and—" As the majority shareholder of Bennett Construction, I continued, raising my voice slightly, "I think this is exactly the right time." The room went silent. Robert's face turned an interesting shade of purple. "What did you say?" James started distributing copies of the ownership documents. "Mrs. Bennett owns 51% of this company," he explained calmly. "Has owned it since her husband's death, actually, and she has some concerns about recent management decisions." Tom stepped forward next, presenting his findings about the financial irregularities. With each revelation, Robert and Diana seemed to shrink in their chairs. Their carefully constructed facade was crumbling in front of everyone. "This is preposterous," Robert finally exploded, standing up so violently his chair toppled backward. Michael would never. Michael did. I interrupted, pulling out one final document, a letter he'd written to his parents, never sent, explaining his decision to buy majority ownership. He loved you both so much he couldn't bear to see you lose everything. So he saved the company quietly, asking nothing in return except that you run it honestly. Diana was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. Emily, please, we can explain. Explain what? I asked, my voice breaking slightly. How you tried to manipulate me into selling Michael's cars? How you implied my son was a burden? How you spread rumors about my mental health when I wouldn't do what you wanted? The board members were whispering among themselves, looking scandalized. Several longtime employees were shaking their heads in disgust. As of this moment, I announced, standing straight and channeling every ounce of strength I had, you're both suspended from your positions pending a full audit. The board will appoint an interim CEO, and all financial decisions will require majority shareholder approval, meaning mine. You can't do this, Robert shouted. We built this company. And Michael saved it, I replied quietly. The same man whose son you called a burden. The same man whose legacy you tried to steal. They left the meeting in disgrace, but it wasn't the end. Over the next few weeks, they tried everything, tearful apologies, threats, attempts to rally other family members against me. But the evidence was too clear, the betrayal too complete. The audit revealed years of financial mismanagement. Rather than press charges, I offered them a deal, retirement with a modest pension, provided they signed ironclad agreements never to contest my ownership or approach Nathan about his inheritance. 6 months later, Bennett Construction is thriving under new management. I've taken a more active role in the company, learning the business Michael believed in enough to save. The classic car collection remains intact, appreciated in value, waiting for Nathan's future. Last weekend, Nathan and I took the Mustang for a drive. His first time in one of Daddy's special cars. As we cruised along the coast, him chattering excitedly about each gauge and button, I felt Michael's presence so strongly it brought tears to my eyes. Mom, Nathan asked, do you think Dad would be proud of us? I looked at my son, my miracle boy who fights every day with a smile on his face, and thought about everything we'd overcome together. Yes, sweetheart, I said, squeezing his hand. Dad would be very proud. Some of Michael's relatives still think I was too harsh with his parents. They don't understand that this was never about money or power, or even revenge. It was about protecting what Michael worked so hard to build. It was about standing up for our son. It was about honoring the love of a man who always did the right thing, even when it was hard, even when it hurt. The cars in our garage aren't just vehicles anymore. They're reminders that sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't what's in the bank. It's the strength to stand up for what's right, the courage to protect what matters, and the wisdom to know the difference between justice and revenge. As for Robert and Diana, I heard they moved to Florida last month. Sometimes I think about sending them pictures of Nathan learning to work on the Mustang just like his father did. But some bridges, once burned, are better left as ashes. The future stretches out before us like an open road, and for the first time since Michael's death, I'm not afraid to see where it leads, because I know now what he always knew, that the strongest steel is forged in fire, and the truest legacy is the one we build ourselves, one choice at a time. Life can change in an instant. One moment you're driving home from a late shift at the hospital. The next you're waking up in a hospital bed, unable to feel your legs. But sometimes the real pain isn't physical. It's discovering who stands by you when things get tough and who walks away. My name is Elena Rodriguez, and I was a nurse at Memorial Hospital until the night a drunk driver ran a red light and shattered not just my body, but my faith and family. The first few days after the accident were a blur of surgeries, pain medication, and tearful family visits. My parents, my older brother Marco, and my younger sister Sophia crowded around my bed, promising they'd help me through this. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. With intensive physical therapy and proper care, I might walk again. Then the medical bills started arriving. $150,000. Mom's voice shook as she read the first statement. But your insurance. My coverage has a cap, I explained weakly. And I'll need ongoing physical therapy, maybe modifications to my apartment. We'll figure something out, Dad said, but I saw the worry in his eyes. Our family had never been wealthy. Mom and Dad had worked hard to put us through school. Marco was now a successful real estate agent. Sophia was finishing law school, and I'd chosen nursing because I wanted to help people. The first sign of trouble came when Marco missed our weekly family dinner. He's busy with a big listing, Mom explained, not meeting my highs. Sophia stopped visiting soon after, claiming her final exams needed all her attention. Then came the conversation that would haunt me. Elena, honey, Mom perched on the edge of my hospital bed, Dad standing awkwardly by the window. We need to talk about arrangements. I knew that tone. It was the same one she used when telling me our childhood dog had died. What arrangements? Your medical bills, Dad cut in. They're overwhelming. The physical therapy alone would drain our retirement savings and the modifications to the house. My apartment, I corrected. I'll need modifications to my apartment. Mom and Dad exchanged glances. About that, Mom said gently, we've been thinking. Maybe it would be better if you moved to a care facility. There's one in Nevada that accepts charity cases. The word hit me like a physical blow. Charity cases. You want to send me away. We want what's best for everyone, Dad said, his voice strained. Your siblings have their own lives, their own futures to think about. We can't let your situation drain the family's resources. My situation. Like my paralysis was a poor financial decision I made. I see, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. And what does Grandma Rosa think about this plan? Another uncomfortable glance between them. My grandmother Rosa had raised me as much as my parents had, teaching me Spanish lullabies and ancient family recipes. She'd been the one who supported my dream of becoming a nurse when my parents wanted me to pursue something more lucrative. Your grandmother is emotional about this, Mom said carefully. She's not thinking practically. She's thinking like family, I shot back. Which is more than I can say for you. They left shortly after, promising to look into the Nevada facility. I lay in my hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to process how quickly my family had decided I was too expensive to love. But Grandma Rosa had other plans. She arrived the next morning like a tiny hurricane, all 5 feet of her bristling with righteous anger. Que vergüenza, she declared, setting down a basket of homemade empanadas. Your parents have lost their minds if they think I'm letting my Naida be sent away like unwanted furniture. Grandma, the bills are none of your concern, she cut me off firmly. I may be old, but I'm not poor. I have savings, investments. Your abuelo didn't work 40 years in his restaurant for nothing. Over the next few weeks, as I began physical therapy, Grandma Rosa became my rock. She attended every session, learned every exercise, and filled out every insurance form. When I was finally discharged, she insisted I move in with her rather than go to my now inaccessible apartment. Your parents think money is everything, she muttered as she helped me settle into her guest room. Now equipped with all the necessary modifications, they forget what matters most. My family's visits became rare and stopped altogether. Marco sent occasional texts, usually around holidays. Sophia made excuses about being too busy with her new law firm job. Mom and Dad called on my birthday, their voices stiff with awkward guilt. But Grandma Rosa never wavered. She drove me to therapy, cooked my favorite meals, and slowly helped me rebuild my strength, both physical and emotional. When I had dark days, questioning if I ever walk again, she'd sit beside me telling stories about our family's history of overcoming adversity. Your great-grandmother crossed the border with nothing but 3 children and a dream, she'd say. You have her spirit, Miss Fuerte que el acero, stronger than steel. A year passed. With intensive therapy and Grandma's unwavering support, I progressed from wheelchair to walker to forearm crutches. The doctors called it remarkable. I called it stubbornness, another family trait, according to Grandma. Then came the diagnosis that would change everything again. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, the doctor said gently, looking at Grandma Rosa's scans. I'm so sorry. I sat there in my wheelchair, holding my grandmother's hand, feeling the world tilt on its axis once more. But Grandma Rosa just nodded, as if she'd been expecting this. How long? She asked calmly. 3 months, maybe 4. She squeezed my hand. Enough time. Enough time for what, Grandma? She smiled mysteriously. Enough time to make sure justice is served, my amor. Your family thinks money is everything. Let's see how they feel when they learn the truth about my will. I didn't understand then what she meant, I was too focused on the idea of losing her, the one person who'd stood by me through everything. But Grandma Rosa had been planning for this moment for longer than any of us knew. And her final act of love would shake our family to its core. Part 2. Grandma Rosa's final months were a masterclass in quiet dignity and careful planning. While I focused on taking care of her, she was busy putting her own plan into motion. Mi amor, she called me into her study one evening, about a month after her diagnosis. There's something you need to know. She was sitting at her antique desk, surrounded by papers and old photographs. The room smelled of her favorite coffee and the lavender lotion she always used. I maneuvered my wheelchair next to her, noticing how thin she'd become, how the cancer was stealing her strength but not her spirit. Your abuelo and I, she began, pulling out a thick folder. We weren't just restaurant owners. We were investors. Smart ones. She opened the folder, revealing bank statements and property deeds. Everyone thinks the restaurant was our only success. But Miguel had a gift for seeing opportunities. The documents showed a portfolio worth millions, commercial properties, stock investments, even partial ownership in several successful businesses across the city. Grandma, I whispered. How? Why didn't anyone know? She smiled, the same mysterious smile she'd worn at the doctor's office. Because money changes people, mi amor. We saw how it changed your father when his business did well, how it made him forget where he came from. We decided our children would make their own way, earn their own success. The money would wait for the right moment, for someone who understood its true value. She pulled out another document, her will, dated just after my accident. I've watched this past year, she continued, her voice hardening slightly. Watch how your family abandoned you when you needed them most. How they chose money over love, convenience over responsibility. They showed their true colors, and now they will face the consequences. The will was clear. The entire estate, worth nearly $15 million, would go to me. There were smaller bequests to various charities, but the bulk of the fortune, the properties, investments, even the beloved restaurant, would be mine. But Grandma, I protested. What about Mom, Marco, and Sophia? They get what they valued most, she said firmly. Nothing. They chose money over family. Let them live with that choice. Over the next few weeks, as Grandma's condition worsened, she taught me everything about managing the portfolio. She introduced me to her financial advisors, her property managers, her business partners. Every lesson was a gift, every introduction a piece of the legacy she was preparing me to carry. The family began visiting again as news of Grandma's illness spread. First Mom and Dad, then Marco and Sophia. They brought flowers, offered help, made awkward conversation that carefully avoided any mention of their year-long absence. Such devoted children, Grandma would say, her voice dripping with sarcasm they never seemed to notice. So concerned about their poor sick mother. I watched them fawn over her, remembering how easily they'd been willing to ship me off to Nevada when I was the one who needed care. The contrast was stark, painful, illuminating. The end came peacefully on a Sunday morning. Grandma Rosa passed away in her sleep, the scent of fresh coffee still lingering in the kitchen from her last late-night cafecito. The family gathered for the funeral, appropriately sad and supportive. Mom kept trying to hug me, Sophia offered to help me sort through things, and Marco started talking about selling the house to cover expenses. Then came the reading of the will. Mr. Ramirez, Grandma's lawyer for over 30 years, watched with barely concealed satisfaction as he revealed the truth about her estate. The properties, the investments, the millions she'd accumulated in secret. The entire estate, he announced, with the exception of specified charitable donations, is bequeathed to Elena Rodriguez, with the following message to be read to the family. He pulled out a separate envelope and began to read. To my family, money shows us who people truly are. When Elena needed you most, you showed me exactly who you had become. You chose wealth over love, convenience over compassion. Now you will understand the cost of that choice. Elena, my amor, you proved yourself worthy of this legacy not through success or status, but through the strength of your heart. Use it wisely, use it kindly, but never use it to enable those who would abandon family for financial convenience. The room erupted in chaos. Mom burst into tears. Dad started shouting about undue influence. Marco and Sophia looked like they'd been slapped. This can't be legal, Marco sputtered. She wasn't in her right mind. I have extensive documentation proving otherwise, Mr. Ramirez said calmly, including videos Dola Rosa recorded explaining her decisions. Would you like to see them? They didn't. Of course they didn't. Instead, they turned to me, faces transformed by desperate hope. Elena, sweetie, Mom stepped forward. You know this isn't what your grandmother really wanted. We're family. Family? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Where was family when you wanted to send me to Nevada? When you decided I was too expensive to love? We were scared. Sophia tried. We didn't know what to do. Grandma knew. I cut her off. She knew exactly what to do. She showed up. She helped. She put family first. But the money, Marco began, is exactly why you're all here now, I finished. Not because you care about me, not because you miss Grandma, but because suddenly there's money involved. Just like when you disappeared because my medical bills were too expensive. I wheeled myself to the door, then turned back to face them one last time. Grandma Rosa taught me a lot this past year. About strength, about dignity, about what really matters. But you know what the most important lesson was? Sometimes the family you're born with isn't the family you end up with. In the months that followed, I honored Grandma's legacy in ways that would have made her proud. I established a foundation providing medical assistance to accident victims whose families couldn't afford care. I kept the restaurant running, maintaining it as a cornerstone of the community she'd loved. My family made various attempts to reconcile, each one transparently motivated by the hope of access to the inheritance. I met each attempt with the same response. The time for family was when I needed you, not when you need something from me. Eventually, they stopped trying. Today, 2 years after Grandma Rosa's passing, I run the foundation from an office above the restaurant. I'm walking again, though I keep my wheelchair as a reminder of both the darkest and brightest moments of my life. The physical therapy center I opened next door helps others find their strength, just as I found mine. Sometimes late at night, I sit in Grandma's study, my study now, and look at old family photos. Not with sadness, but with understanding. Money doesn't just talk, as the saying goes. It reveals. It shows us who people really are, not through its presence, but through its absence. Last week, a young accident victim came to the foundation seeking help. His family had abandoned him, deciding his care was too expensive. I looked at him and saw myself 2 years ago, broken, betrayed, but not beaten. Let me tell you a story, I said, wheeling over to sit beside him. About a grandmother who taught me that family isn't about blood or money. It's about who shows up when showing up is hard. As I spoke, I could almost smell Grandma's coffee, hear her voice saying, Miss Foret que el acero. And I knew she was right. Some things are stronger than steel, love, dignity, and the courage to stand by family when it matters most. That's a legacy worth more than all the millions in the world. The day I discovered my parents' betrayal started like any other Tuesday at Oakwood Hills Country Club. The immaculate greens stretch out before me as I parked my modest Honda next to a row of luxury cars, each worth more than my annual salary as the club's events coordinator. If anyone had told me that morning that I'd soon uncover a decades-old family secret that would turn my world upside down, I would have laughed it off. I'm Alexandra Bennett, though most people call me Alex. At 32, I was living a life my grandfather would have found amusing, working at the very country club he'd built from nothing, but never allowed to join as a full member despite being his only grandchild. The service entrance only sign I passed each morning felt like a personal reminder of my complicated family history. Grandpa Richard had been a self-made millionaire who turned 500 acres of rural Massachusetts into one of the most prestigious golf clubs on the East Coast. When he died 5 years ago, everyone expected him to leave Oakwood Hills to my father, his only son. Instead, he left everything to me with one condition. I couldn't take control until my 35th birthday. My parents, Charles and Diana Bennett, were devastated. They'd spent 30 years running the club, building their social status, their entire identity wrapped up in being the faces of Oakwood Hills. The thought of their daughter, who preferred jeans to designer dresses and had once suggested opening the club to public memberships, inheriting everything was apparently too much to bear. You don't understand the responsibilities, Mom would say, sipping her perpetual glass of Chardonnay. The traditions we uphold here, the standards we maintain. Dad was more direct. Your grandfather was losing his mind at the end. He didn't know what he was doing. 3 months ago, they finally wore me down. With the club facing financial difficulties and membership declining, they convinced me to sign over my inheritance rights. It's for the best, darling, Mom insisted. We have the experience to save the club. You'd only struggle with the burden. I believed them. That's what hurts the most looking back. I'd actually believed they had my best interests at heart. The truth began unraveling on that Tuesday morning when I arrived early to prepare for an upcoming charity gala. The club was quiet, the morning mist still clinging to the fairways. I loved these peaceful moments before the members arrived with their designer golf bags and carefully cultivated opinions about everything from wine vintages to proper pudding technique. Martha, who'd been the club's housekeeper for over 40 years, caught me in the main hall. "Alex, dear, could you help me with something in the old storage room? I found some boxes that need sorting." The storage room was actually a small building behind the main clubhouse, filled with decades of club history. Martha led me to a back corner I'd never paid much attention to before. "Your grandfather asked me to wait," she said cryptically, moving aside some old golf bags. "Until the right time. I think that's now." Before I could ask what she meant, her arthritis-gnarled fingers pressed something behind a shelf, and a hidden door swung open with a soft click. "What in the world?" I whispered, staring into what appeared to be a small office, untouched for years. Dust covered everything, but I could see a desk, filing cabinets, and a wall safe. "Your grandfather's private office," Martha explained. "Not even your father knows about it. Richard made me promise to show you when you were ready, after what your parents did with that new contract." She trailed off, but I knew what she meant. The membership restructuring my parents had implemented after I signed over my inheritance rights had forced out several longtime members, including Martha's son, who'd grown up playing on these courses. "The combination is your birthday," Martha said softly. "He changed it the day you were born." My hands trembled as I dialed the numbers. Inside the safe, I found several folders, a leather-bound journal, and a letter addressed to me in my grandfather's distinctive handwriting. "My dearest Alexandra," it began. "If you're reading this, it means two things. I'm no longer here to protect you, and your parents have finally shown their true colors." I sank into the dusty desk chair, Martha's comforting presence behind me as I read on. The letter detailed years of manipulation and deceit. My parents hadn't just been running the club. They'd been systematically embezzling from it, hiding their theft through creative accounting and membership fee manipulation. "The financial troubles they're likely using to pressure you," Grandpa's letter continued. "They created them. Every penny they've stolen is documented in these files. I knew they'd try to take control from you, which is why I left things as I did. The will they showed you, the one you base your signing decision on, it's not the real one." My vision blurred with tears as I read further. The hidden office contained proof of everything: decades of financial records, surveillance photos, private investigator reports. My grandfather had spent years building a case against his own son, protecting his legacy and my inheritance. But the most damning evidence was in a thin folder marked "Original Will Final Version." With shaking hands, I opened it and felt my world tilt on its axis. The will I'd seen, the one that made me wait until 35 to take control, it was a fake. The real will, properly notarized and filed with a separate law firm, gave me immediate control upon his death. My parents had hidden this, forged documents, and manipulated me into signing away rights I should have had 5 years ago. "There's more," Martha said gently, pointing to a sticky note attached to another folder. "Look at the membership records from 1990. I opened the folder and felt my breath catch. The carefully maintained membership ledger contained a secret that explained so much about my family's dynamics. My father, the supposedly pure-blooded Bennett heir, wasn't Richard Bennett's biological son at all. My grandmother had had an affair with a club employee, and my grandfather had known all along. He loved your father anyway," Martha explained softly, "raised him as his own. But he never trusted him with the club's future. That's why everything was meant for you, his only blood relative." The implications hit me like a physical blow. Every snide comment about my unsuitability to run the club, every reference to carrying on the Bennett legacy, it had all been based on a lie. I spent the next hour going through the files, each revelation more shocking than the last. My parents hadn't just stolen my inheritance, they'd been systematically destroying the club I'd grown up loving, all while maintaining their perfect social facade. A text from my mother jolted me back to the present. Emergency board meeting at 3 p.m. Wear something appropriate for once. I looked at Martha, who'd been quietly organizing the files while I processed everything. What do I do now? She smiled, and for a moment I saw the steel beneath her gentle exterior. Your grandfather left you everything you need to take back what's yours. The question is, are you ready to use it? I thought about every dismissive comment, every manipulation, every time they made me feel small and unworthy. Then I thought about my grandfather, who'd spent years preparing for this moment, ensuring I would have the tools to fight back. Yes, I said, straightening my spine. I'm ready. The Oakwood Hills boardroom hadn't changed since I was a child sneaking peeks through its heavy oak doors. The same oversized portraits of past club presidents, including my grandfather, watched over the massive mahogany table where the club's elite made their decisions. But today, something was different. Today, I was different. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed not in the appropriate cocktail dress my mother had texted about, but in a crisp business suit I'd bought for professional events. Martha had helped me load 3 boxes of documents into my car, each file carefully organized and tagged. Alexandra, my mother's voice dripped disapproval as she entered. What are you wearing? And what are these boxes? Just some old club records, I replied calmly, watching her perfectly manicured hands fidget with her pearls. Very enlightening reading. Dad strode in next, followed by the board members. Judge Harrison, Dr. Phillips, the Whitmore sisters, and other pillars of local society who'd been my parents' closest allies for decades. Last King Gerald Matthews, the club's accountant, looking nervous as he clutched his laptop. Let's begin, Dad announced, taking his usual place at the head of the table. As you know, membership has continued to decline despite our best efforts. Gerald has prepared a presentation on our financial situation. Actually, I interrupted, standing up. I have something to present first. My mother's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. Alexandra, dear, this is a board meeting, not one of your little event planning sessions. You're right, I agreed, moving to the front of the room. This is about something much more important. This is about fraud, embezzlement, and a decades-long conspiracy to steal from Oakwood Hills Country Club. The room erupted in murmurs. Judge Harrison leaned forward, his bushy eyebrows drawn together. Those are serious accusations, young lady. Yes, they are. I started distributing folders to each board member, and I have proof of every single one. What followed was the most satisfying hour of my life. I laid out everything, the real will, the financial records showing systematic theft, the membership fee manipulation. With each revelation, my parents' faces grew paler. This is absurd, Dad finally exploded, standing up so quickly his chair toppled backward. I've run this club for 30 years. You've stolen from this club for 30 years, I corrected, pulling out my grandfather's journal. And Grandpa knew. He documented everything. Richard was losing his mind at the end. Mom interjected quickly. Everyone knows that. Actually, Mrs. Bennett, Gerald Matthews spoke up, surprising everyone. He wasn't. I helped him gather some of this evidence. My parents' heads whipped around to stare at their supposedly loyal accountant. Gerald squared his shoulders, looking relieved to finally speak up. Richard Bennett approached me 7 years ago, he continued. He showed me proof of the embezzlement and asked for my help documenting it. I've been keeping separate books ever since. You betrayed us, Mom whispered. No, Diana. You betrayed the club. And your daughter. Gerald turned to the board. Everything Alexandra is saying is true. I have the digital records to prove it. Judge Harrison was already reading through the documents, his judicial expression growing stormier by the minute. Charles, Diana, these allegations are extremely serious. The evidence suggests criminal behavior. There's more, I said quietly, pulling out the final folder. Dad, would you like to tell everyone about Arthur Collins? The groundskeeper from 1990? The color drained from my father's face. My mother grabbed his arm, suddenly unsteady. No, I continued. Then I will. Arthur Collins was my biological grandfather, the man whose family you denied membership to last month because they weren't Oakwood Hills material was actually your half-brother, Dad. The Whitmore sisters gasped in unison. Dr. Phillips dropped his reading glasses. You see, I addressed the board. My grandfather, Richard Bennett, knew that his wife had an affair with Arthur Collins. Knew that his son wasn't biologically his. But he loved him anyway, raised him, gave him every opportunity. And how was he repaid? With theft, lies, and the systematic destruction of everything he built. The club's reputation will be ruined. My mother tried one last time. Alexandra, think about what you're doing to the Bennett name. I'm thinking about justice. I cut her off. I'm thinking about the members you've driven away, the employees you've underpaid, the legacy you've tarnished, and I'm thinking about what Grandpa Richard would want me to do. I pulled out the final document, the real will properly notarized and certified. As the legal owner of Oakwood Hills Country Club, I moved to remove Charles and Diana Bennett from their positions, effective immediately. I also moved to begin a full forensic audit of club finances, with the intention of making restitution to all affected members. The vote was unanimous. The aftermath was both swift and far-reaching. My parents left the club that day and haven't returned since. Last I heard, they'd moved to Florida. Apparently that's where disgraced country club managers go to retire. The audit revealed over $12 million in misappropriated funds over 3 decades. Rather than press criminal charges, I offered them a deal: repay everything they'd stolen, sign over their personal assets, and never contest my ownership of the club. They agreed, probably realizing it was their only chance to avoid jail time. Oakwood Hills is different now. I reinstated the members who'd been forced out, including Martha's son. The Collins family, my newly discovered relatives, were offered lifetime memberships. The stuffy dress code was relaxed, and we started offering golf lessons to local school children. Your grandfather would be proud, Martha told me last week, watching from the terrace as a group of kids learned putting basics on the practice green. This was always his vision, a place where people could come together, not be kept apart. The portrait wall in the boardroom has changed too. Alongside the stern faces of past presidents, there's now a photo of Arthur Collins, the groundskeeper who loved his job so much he stayed even after watching another man raise his son. Next to it hangs a picture of Grandpa Richard, and beside that is a new addition, my official portrait as club president, the first woman to hold the position. Sometimes, during quiet mornings when the dew still clings to the fairways, I sit in my grandfather's hidden office, my office now, and read his journal. His words have become a guide, not just for running the club but for living with integrity. The true measure of a legacy, he wrote, isn't in the money we leave behind or the buildings we put our names on. It's in the lives we touch and the wrongs we make right. Last month, we hosted the first annual Richard Bennett Memorial Tournament, with all proceeds going to local education scholarships. The club was packed, not with elite members showing off their designer golf wear, but with families, children, and people who genuinely love the game. As I watched the sunset paint the greens in shades of gold, I thought about legacy, about justice, and about the different ways we can choose to honor the past while building a better future. My parents tried to steal my inheritance, but they couldn't steal what really mattered. The values my grandfather instilled in me, the strength to stand up for what's right, and the vision of what Oakwood Hills could truly be. The service entrance-only sign came down the day after the board meeting. Now there's just one entrance to Oakwood Hills Country Club. The same door welcomes everyone, just as my grandfather always intended. Some people say love conquers all, but my in-laws proved that prejudice can be stronger than family ties. Not that the Blackwoods ever really considered me or my son family, despite my 15-year marriage to their precious firstborn son James. I'm Catherine Blackwood, though I started life as Catherine Chen, daughter of Chinese immigrants who built a successful restaurant business in San Francisco. At 42, I found myself navigating life as a widow and single mother to my 12-year-old son William, who happens to be autistic. My husband James had been my strongest supporter, both in my career as an architectural preservationist and in advocating for William's needs. But a heart attack took him from us 2 years ago, leaving me to face his family's increasing hostility alone. The Blackwoods owned Evergreen Manor, one of the most prestigious wedding venues in New England. The historic mansion and its perfectly manicured gardens had hosted society weddings for 4 generations. My sister-in-law, Christine, was about to become the latest Blackwood to marry there, and that's when everything came to a head. About the wedding, Catherine, my mother-in-law Margaret cornered me after Sunday dinner, her perfectly manicured nails wrapped around a crystal sherry glass. We need to discuss William's involvement. I knew that tone. It was the same one she used when discussing the help or anyone else she considered beneath her. What about it? He's excited about being part of his aunt's special day. Margaret's lips thinned. That's just it. Christine wants a perfect society wedding. All the right people will be there. We can't have any disruptions. Disruptions? I kept my voice level, though my hands clenched in my lap. William's been doing wonderfully with his therapy. He's learned so many coping strategies. Catherine, dear, be realistic. Margaret interrupted. We all know William struggles with loud noises and crowds, and his behaviors, they're not appropriate for such an important event. His behaviors? I could hear my voice rising. You mean his stimming? His occasional need for quiet breaks? These are part of who he is. And that's fine, Margaret said in a tone that suggested it was anything but fine. For family gatherings and such. But this is different. The governor's family will be there. The senator's daughter is a bridesmaid. We simply can't risk William having one of his episodes. I looked around for support, but found none. George, my father-in-law, was suddenly very interested in his paper. Even Christine, who used to spend hours playing video games with William, wouldn't meet my eyes. James would never have allowed this, I said quietly. James isn't here, Margaret replied, her voice sharp. And the Blackwood reputation is more important than your grandson. Got it. I stood up, my chair scraping against the antique hardwood floors Margaret was so proud of. William and I won't be attending. Don't be dramatic, Margaret sighed. Of course you should come. William can stay with that nice special needs sitter you use sometimes. I left without another word, driving home through tears of rage and grief. William was waiting up, despite the late hour, working on his latest architectural model. My brilliant, beautiful boy who saw the world in such unique ways, who could tell you the history and design features of every major building in Boston, who'd inherited his father's gentle heart and my love of historical preservation. Bad dinner? He asked, noticing my expression. William might struggle with some social cues, but he'd always been tuned into my emotions. Just grandma being grandma, I said, sitting beside him to examine his model. A perfect miniature of Evergreen Manor. This is beautiful, sweetheart. Thanks. I used the original blueprints from great-grandpa's study to get all the details right. His hands fluttered excitedly as he pointed out various features. Did you know the east wing was added in 1892? And look at these supporting arches. I froze. What blueprints from great-grandpa's study? William looked puzzled. The ones in the hidden room behind the library. I found them last month when I was exploring during Sunday dinner. There's all kinds of old documents in there. My heart started racing. James had once mentioned his grandfather's private study, a room that was sealed up after his death. Apparently, it wasn't as sealed as everyone thought. The next day, after dropping William at his specialized school program, I drove to Evergreen Manor. As the widow of the eldest son, I still had keys and security codes. The mansion was quiet, the wedding planning committee not due for hours. William's directions led me to the library, where he discovered a panel that opened into a small room that smelled of old paper and secrets. Dozens of filing cabinets lined the walls, each meticulously labeled. But it wasn't the architectural drawings that caught my eye. It was a thick folder marked Ownership Trust, Final Version. My hands trembled as I read through the documents. Edward Blackwood, James's grandfather, had been quite thorough in his estate planning. The manor wasn't owned by the Blackwood family at all. It was held in a specialized trust with very specific conditions about family unity and care for all descendants. But there was more. A sealed envelope addressed to the future guardian of the manor contained a letter that shook me to my core. Edward had an autistic brother, hidden away from society due to the prejudices of his time. The grand ballroom where society brides now danced. It was originally designed as a sensory-friendly space for his brother, with special acoustic treatments and quiet nooks. The manor was built on love and acceptance, Edward wrote. Any Blackwood who forgets that dishonors its true purpose. As I read on, a plan began forming in my mind. Margaret's precious wedding venue business operated under a special historical site license, one that depended on adhering to the trust's original terms. Terms that I now held in my hands. My phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. Wedding planner needs final headcount, assuming William won't attend. I looked around the hidden study, at the evidence of a legacy of love corrupted by prejudice and pretense. Time to restore this house to its true purpose, I whispered, thinking of my son's perfect architectural model, his deep connection to this place that should have been his heritage. Margaret had no idea what was coming. Evergreen Manor was at its most beautiful in the early morning light. I stood in the grand ballroom, watching dust motes dance in the sunbeams streaming through the original acoustically designed windows. William was right. His great-grandfather had been an architectural genius, creating spaces that were both stunning and sensory-conscious. The wedding was 3 days away, and the mansion buzzed with activity. Florists, caterers, and event staff scurried around, all under Margaret's imperious supervision. She nearly dropped her designer clipboard when she saw me. "Catherine, what are you doing here? The family brunch isn't until Sunday." "We need to talk," I interrupted. "All of us. Now." Something in my voice must have convinced her because 15 minutes later, the Blackwood family gathered in the Manor's conference room. Margaret, George, Christine, and her fiancé Thomas, even Aunt Eleanor, who'd flown in from Connecticut for the wedding. I placed my laptop and a thick folder of documents on the mahogany table. "Before we begin, I'd like to play something for you." The recording was from one of William's therapy sessions 6 months ago. In it, he described his connection to Evergreen Manor, his understanding of its architectural features, his love for the quiet corners and perfect acoustics his great-grandfather had built into the design. "Turn that off," Margaret snapped. "We're not here to discuss William's fixations." "Actually, we are." I opened the folder. "Because Edward Blackwood designed this manor specifically with people like William in mind. Would anyone like to hear about Uncle Robert?" The room went silent. Even George looked startled. "Who?" Christine asked. "Your great-uncle Robert, Edward's brother. The autistic brother this manor was originally built to accommodate." I began distributing copies of Edward's letter and the trust documents. "The brother your generation was never told about because Margaret decided that part of the family history was too embarrassing." Margaret's face went pale. "Where did you get those?" "From Edward's private study, the one you sealed up after his death. Turns out you can't keep secrets from an architecturally gifted 12-year-old who notices hidden doors." The next hour was a revelation for the family. I showed them Edward's original designs, his detailed notes about acoustic treatments and sensory-friendly spaces. The grand ballroom's famous perfect acoustics weren't for wedding music. They were designed to prevent overwhelming echoes that could trigger sensory overload. But the weddings, Christine protested weakly. "The business was never supposed to be the manor's primary purpose." I finished. "The trust is very clear. Evergreen Manor was meant to be a safe haven for all Blackwood descendants, with specific provisions for supporting those with special needs." I turned to my father-in-law. "George, did you know your father left control of the trust to his eldest son's heir, not to you or Margaret?" George shook his head slowly. "Dad always said there were conditions, but Margaret handled all the legal aspects after we married." "Because she buried the truth," I said quietly. "But here it is. As James's widow and William's mother, I control the trust. And the wedding venue business operates under a special historical site license that depends on adhering to the trust's original terms." Margaret stood up so quickly her chair toppled backward. "You wouldn't dare." "Cancel the wedding business? No, but I am making changes." I laid out my terms clearly. First, William not only attends the wedding, but he helps redesign the event to be sensory-friendly. His great-grandfather's original designs prove it's possible to have both elegance and accessibility. "The governor's family," Margaret began, "will be impressed by our commitment to inclusive celebration spaces." I cut in. "Second, going forward, Evergreen Manor will operate as both a wedding venue and a special needs-friendly event space. We'll offer sensory-friendly weddings, proms for special needs schools, events that honor Edward's original vision." Christine surprised everyone by speaking up. "I think it's brilliant. Thomas and I would be honored to have the first sensory-friendly society wedding. Right, honey?" Thomas, whose younger sister I remembered was on the autism spectrum, nodded enthusiastically. "My family would love it, and it would make incredible press. Historic venue returns to its inclusive roots." One by one, family members began to see the potential. George looked relieved, as if a weight he carried for years was lifting. Even Aunt Eleanor shared stories about Uncle Robert that she'd heard from her mother. Margaret alone remained opposed, but her power was broken. When she threatened to contest the trust, I simply played another recording. Edward Blackwood himself talking about his brother and his hopes for the manor's future. I leave this trust in the hands of my eldest son's heir. His voice crackled through time, knowing they will understand that true nobility lies not in excluding those who are different, but in creating spaces where all can thrive. The wedding was transformed. William worked with the planners, explaining how to adjust lighting and sound levels while maintaining the elegant atmosphere. His intimate knowledge of the manor's architecture proved invaluable. The governor's wife, whose nephew was autistic, became an enthusiastic supporter of our inclusive vision. Margaret, of course, was horrified when William stemmed during the ceremony, until the governor's wife commented on how wonderful it was to see a family embracing neurodiversity so openly. After that, she limited herself to tight smiles and stiff acceptance. The changes to Evergreen Manor went far beyond one wedding. We launched a series of sensory-friendly events, partnering with special needs organizations throughout New England. The manor's unique architectural features, designed by Edward for his brother, became a selling point instead of a secret. William flourished in his new role as the manor's unofficial architectural historian. His detailed models and knowledge of the building's features impressed everyone who visited. Even Margaret, after seeing him confidently lead a tour for a historical preservation society, had to admit he brought something special to the family business. Last month, during a quiet moment in Edward's study, I found another letter, this one addressed specifically to William. To my future architect, it began. If you're reading this, you've discovered what I always knew, that different minds see beauty others miss. This house is your heritage, not because of your name, but because you understand its heart. William keeps the letter framed in his room, next to his latest architectural model, a design for a modern sensory-friendly event space inspired by his great-grandfather's work. Margaret still struggles with our new direction, but the success is undeniable. Evergreen Manor has become known as New England's premier venue for inclusive events. Our waiting list is longer than ever, and several other historic venues have consulted us about sensory-friendly renovations. Yesterday, I watched William showing a group of autistic teenagers the manor's hidden acoustic features. His hands danced with excitement as he explained the engineering principles, his audience completely engaged. In that moment, I saw Edward's vision fully realized, a space where difference isn't just accommodated, but celebrated. The portrait gallery has been updated. Alongside the stern-faced Blackwoods of the past, there's now a photo of Edward and Robert as young men, standing in front of the newly built manor. Beside it hangs a picture of William at the sensory-friendly wedding, hands fluttering joyfully as he explains the ballroom's design to fascinated guests. Below both photos, there's a quote from Edward's letter. True legacy lives not in maintaining appearances, but in creating spaces where love accepts all forms of being. James would have loved that. Sometimes, when the manor is quiet and the evening light filters through those perfectly designed windows, I swear I can feel the presence of both brothers, Edward and Robert, watching over their creation. Their dream of a house built on understanding and acceptance lives on, not just in the architecture, but in every inclusive event we host, every barrier we break down, every mind we open to the beauty of difference. And William, my beautiful boy who saw through walls to find the truth, continues to build on their foundation, creating spaces where everyone belongs, just as his great-grandfather always intended.